Here is the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, just a few minutes ago. Gary, cut number 3.
So across the entire frontline trace of some 900 or so kilometers, the Ukrainians have achieved success after success after success, and the Russians have failed every single time. They've lost strategically, they've lost operationally, and I repeat, they lost tactically.
All right, is your blood pressure down, Colonel?
No, in fact, I have to pay tribute to General Milley and his ability to contradict himself repeatedly and change his story to align nicely with whatever his political bosses want him to say. I mean, after all, most of the time, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs is picked because he's someone they can rely on to say whatever it is they want him to say. Now, recently, as you know, this is last week, Milley got himself into trouble because he went over to the White House in the Oval Office, and when he was asked about the situation, he said 2 things. These are the components, my wording, but it's roughly the same. He said, first of all, the Ukrainians have accomplished what they can reasonably accomplish at this point. And then secondly, it's a good time to turn to negotiations. We should negotiate.
Well, those are probably truthful statements that he honestly believed.
Oh, yes, because he knows they're bled white. I mean, their little counterattacks right now are company size, 90 or 100 men with a few vehicles. Just 3 months ago, they were attacking in groups of 30 and 40,000. Then 2 months ago, they were down to 500 and 800. Now they're down to groups of 190. The idea being to keep pressure on the Russians. The Russians have slaughtered them. The exchange rate is roughly 1 Russian casualty for every 8 to 10 Ukrainian casualties.
Wow. So who can tell a 4-star general who's the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to go on national television and contradict himself and lie? Who can tell him that and get away with it? The guy next to him, the Secretary of Defense?
It's the Secretary of Defense. I mean, usually when Bob Gates was Secretary of Defense, that's what he did. It's everybody has been doing this for decades. This is what happened during the Vietnam War.
When Joe Biden says, we're not negotiating, let's take them on. Are plans drawn up for the entry of American boots on the ground into this theater of war?
I'm sure that they have contingency plans for U.S. and allied military intervention in Western Ukraine. How far in they plan to go, under what conditions they would go, I have no idea. But it would be imprudent, given the attitude of President Biden and the civilian leaders around him, not to make preparations for something like that. Now, I know that nobody in the Pentagon, at least as far as I can tell, no one at the top wants to do that, because we understand that will make us a co-belligerent. We will end up at war with Russia. These generals, remember, they have been misinforming everyone for decades about how ready we are and how great we are and everything that we can do. And they are now afraid of being caught in that big lie. Kennedy, I think, instructed McNamara to call General Lemnitzer, who was the supreme commander in Europe and a World War II veteran, and ask him what he thought about moving forces to Vietnam. And McNamara called General Lemnitzer and said, General, how long do you think it will take for us to get the 101st into Vietnam? He said, well, I should think it won't take very long. He said, the question is, how long is it going to take us to get it out again? At that point, McNamara was not happy and hung up on him. Do you understand? So you're dealing with a similar group of people right now. I don't think they understand.
We're certainly dealing with a nearly identical mentality.
Only now, the one thing to keep in mind is in 1965, we were in infinitely better condition militarily than we are now. We probably had the best army we'd ever had in our history. The Navy was superb. The Air Force was superb. So we were quite capable of going in and conducting decisive operations. What I'm trying to say is we're not capable of that right now. Our forces are not in great shape. Are the conditions or the foundations for our power have eroded significantly over the last 30 years. The generals know it, and they're worried.